All right. I don't think Harry's going to jump on. So, what do you think, Jay? Should we just start?
Let's go.
Okay. And if he comes crashing in, it'll be, on brand. So that'll be good. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. I'd like to welcome to BeerNet Radio Bill Kirk, CFA, Managing Director and Senior Research Analyst at Roth Capital Partners, where he covers beverage, food retail, and cannabis. Bill has had a long 15 plus year career covering Bevalk and more, which is how I met him because, disclaimer for those of you who don't know, he is in fact my husband. Another fun fact, he was once a professional baseball pitcher for the Phillies affiliate teams and an assistant to the Phillies hitting coach. And he also went to school with Ivanka Trump, but that's, for another day. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you for having me. I'll take the intro, but I think we'll just focus on the beverage stuff.
Okay, okay. All business, all business. So you just left me and the kids for 3 days to go to Vegas to cover MJ BizCon, but it was for a good cause. And you published a note on Friday with a couple of interesting tidbits on this world. You said in the note that since hemp was effectively banned a year from now, the group is pleading for an extra year because reversal of the loophole closure for intoxicating hemp is a much harder ask. And you point out that, quote, on the whole, hemp does not seem to be an important issue in DC. So, but the question is this: what was the vibe on the ground from the hemp crew at the show? Were they confident? Did they seem desperate, combatant?
They seem a little desperate, and any sort of confidence or optimism I think they're exuding is, almost trying to make themselves feel better, right?
Mm.
They're trying to talk themselves into having some avenues here. But someone made a really good point, and they said, hemp has spent the last few years operating in that loophole and doing all their lobbying and all their efforts on like a very hyper local stage, like
Mm.
very state specific. So state assembly, state senators, not state senators going into the national government, but very state specific. And now that the conversation and the loophole's closing, the conversation goes to a federal level where they haven't spent any time lobbying. So
Mm.
all those, I don't know, avenues to talk to the right people and all those pipelines of lobbying efforts, they don't have on a federal basis. They've spent all their time talking to individual states and individual, kind of assemblymen within those states rather than a federal lobbying effort. And when now you have to switch, they need to figure out who to talk to. The people they need to talk to are completely different. And the people they need to talk to might not care. Like,
Mm.
cannabis THC isn't really an important topic in DC. Hemp is less important in
Mm.
DC. Aside from Rand Paul, there aren't many politicians willing to make hemp their cause, right? And where I'm going to make intoxicating hemp my cause. So unless you have a really close tie to maybe the farmers in your specific region, who's taking up that fight, right? And that's where hemp really struggles, and I think that's why their ask right now is just extra time because
Mm.
they need to build the relationships and conversations on a federal basis that they don't have because they're so focused state by state.
Yeah. That makes sense. To your point, you said Rand Paul, and there have been others, like I think Nancy Mace kind of came out in support. I have seen a little here and there, but you're right. And I mean, I think the other thing is, marijuana has spent a lot of time lobbying at the federal level.
Mhm.
So why would hemp be any more successful? And in fact, they're often at odds, right? Although some of the marijuana guys are getting into the space, but
They're often at odds, but those larger marijuana companies, they're not eager to help out their hemp brethren,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
They've been competitors, and the traditional THC guys would say they've been competitors on an uneven playing field, right? So they've been exploiting something that's really hurt our business. So why are we going to reach out and help them? And so for if you're an operator in say Florida, right? If you're truly in Florida, you've been going against I don't know, 7,000 intoxicating hemp retail locations in the state. There's only 700 plus dispensaries in the
Mhm.
state. And so it's a huge competitor of theirs. Maybe their number one competitor, not any other THC company, these intoxicating hemp folks as a whole. And they would love they would love for them to go away. It'd be a huge competitor to go away. So the THC guys aren't friends. The I don't know, the beer guys, the beer manufacturers aren't friends. And if you look at that Senate vote that Rand Paul brought to see what to do with
Hmm.
the intoxicating hemp part of the government funding bill, it got defeated resoundly. It wasn't like a 51-49. It was, I'm going to mess up the number by a couple, but it was like 76-24.
Yeah.
Right. And that isn't a cause that people are eager to go fight because it's, why sign up for the team that's being beaten badly?
But they do have some friends on the Bevalc retailer side, right? Like John Halper, who
Hmm.
owns Top 10 Liquors in Minnesota, spoke at the conference, and I think you
Yes.
peeped in on his session. So, how concerned did he and maybe any other such retailers that you saw there seem about this going away? Because you and I were just at a Twin Liquors on Saturday. There's an entire wall of this stuff, right, that replaced warm craft beer. So, how important is it to them from what you've seen?
It's important to them, but John made a good and realistic point of he'll be fine, right? Like he believes in this cause, and that's maybe part of why he's so vocal. And it is a decent part of his business, right? I don't know what the latest numbers you might know, but it might be 10% of his business. I don't know exactly. And maybe it's bigger even on profitability than it is
Yeah.
on sales, right? The margin on this stuff might be better if they are out there paying slotting fees that alcohol can't pay, right, that could help his, with the importance of this category for him in his stores. I don't know if that's the case, but he made the really realistic point of at the end of the day, he'll be okay. Distributors who, carry this product, at the end of the day, they will be okay. It's really the intoxicating hemp manufacturers, right? That's where the pain sits. It's the people who are making this stuff that are 100% reliant. The distributor that it's 2% of their cases in the warehouse, they'll be fine. The retailer, it'd be a little pain, but they'll be fine. And that's again where you kind of maybe don't have enough friends in the vertical, right? Like, is a beer wholesaler willing to die on the 2% hill? Probably not, right? They like to have it. It's nice to have, but it's not the end all be all for them.
I'm kind of surprised that John said that because he's all over LinkedIn, really rah-rahing for this cause. And I guess it depends on the retailer and the wholesaler because, as you know, things are tough out there right now, right? So that profitable last couple percentage points can mean a lot, right?
And,
But
and
yeah.
maybe some of it shifts back, right? Like, craft beer is down more than regular beer, and that maybe craft beer gets a little bit better, right? So he might have some substitutes in the store. And to be clear, like he definitely wants it, right? I mean, but he's on a panel with a manufacturer, right? Like he
Mm,
was sharing the panel with Moon. It's spelled MXXN, but it's pronounced Moon. And he was
mhm.
on a panel with a manufacturer. So it's hard to lament how hard it is for you when the manufacturer is facing a
Sure.
much more difficult,
Extinction. Yeah.
yeah, event.
Yeah.
Bill, you mentioned in your note that everyone keeps talking about the year timeline
Mm.
for the ban, but it's actually much shorter. Why is that, and where next year do you think we'll kind of know this is going to happen or this is not?
So yes, I think that's right. It's much shorter because people have to plan. So if you're a farmer and you want to grow a bunch of hemp, you have to get it in the ground by mid-May. And so, and to get it in the ground by mid-May, you have to decide what kind of workers you need 90 days in advance. So 90 days in advance to get your visas in order for what you want to grow in mid-May puts the timeline for farmers in February. So they need to decide in 2 months, basically, whether they want to grow enough hemp for next year. And then, so that's their decision. But even further up the vertical, right, as you kind of move through the supply chain, you're going to have wholesalers who aren't going to be made whole by these intoxicating hemp beverage manufacturers, right? For any inventory they get stuck with. So the wholesalers are going to start thinking, do I want all this product when I might not be able to sell it all through in time and I'll get stuck with it. So the wholesalers will start pulling back. And then you have even like the landlords, right? Like the real estate guys who are leasing these retail locations out to these companies, they're looking out and like, do I really want to do a 12-month lease with this intoxicating hemp company when I might not get paid anything at the end of the period, right? And am I really willing to have them as a tenant? Is this the best use of tenant space for me? And so I think the farmers are on a much shorter timeline. The wholesalers, maybe it's a little closer to a year, but it's less. The landlords is less. But even the lenders, like how, if an intoxicating hemp company needs money, how are they going to convince a lender that they're going to be around in 12 months, right? So the interest rates that they would be able to get from a bank or something would probably be, painfully high and maybe too high to operate if they can get the capital at all. So you have all these like people around the intoxicating hemp like kind of retail environment that need to make these decisions a lot sooner. And I mean, it starts with the farmers, and they have to decide it soon. And some will probably grow, but probably far less will grow, and that becomes a a scenario where supply could dry up before the ban even takes
Mm,
effect.
Yeah. Uh,
interesting.
Okay. And then we talked a little bit about the cannabis THC suppliers, multi-state operators kind of view. And I'm sure they're happy that competition could go away, like we
Mm.
talked about their number one competition. But at the same time, it seems like they also got a peek at the demand outside of dispensary. Do they believe they can seize that type of, demand at some point in time
Mm.
further down the road?
That's the dream. But they've become far more unified in their ask, right? The issue with a lot of this cannabis for the last few years is everybody kind of wanted something different, right? The multi-state operators wanted something different than the single state operators. The retailers wanted something different than the cultivation guys, the guys growing the stuff. The Canadians who have, big medical business wanted something different than the US players. So everybody was kind of lobbying for different things, whether it was we want banking or we want descheduling, where like full legalization, we want rescheduling, we want interstate commerce, right? Like all these things divided the group pretty dramatically. And I think it's part of why they couldn't get anything done because they didn't have like a unified ask. But today they're extremely unified in what they're asking for. And it's the kind of the easiest thing, maybe. It's rescheduling. It's going to Schedule 3, which would make medical cannabis permissible. And when you are asking for, I don't know, something less dramatic, but maybe more importantly, more consistent in who's asking for it, I think it has a better shot at getting done. So yes, the dream is, if you're a manufacturer, the dream is we want it everywhere. But if you're a retailer, you're like, I want my limited license, right? I want to be the only license in this county to be able to sell it. And so the people who want it like ubiquitously available, they start to fragment away from the people who are kind of the current retail operations. And that's where they ask breaks, and that's why they're not doing that yet, because they know there's no progress in the divided ask. We need just one message. It's rescheduling. That's all we're asking for right now.
Yeah. One final one on this topic, but if it does go away and that shelf space does open up with nothing to fill it, from a cannabis type of standpoint, where do you think that space goes to? And do you think there's any certain beverage alcohol segments that might see a trend back up with this disappearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a difficult decision and one that they're not going to have perfect information on. So they're probably going to go back toward either A, what it was, so a lot of craft beer, or B, what has been growing, which may be some of the RTD stuff. So you might see like a reshelving of the long tail of RTD drinks, and you get back some of the craft beer space. And you see it in the breweries, right? Some of the craft brewery tap rooms, they have a ton of THC, right? They didn't have any, and now they have a good amount, and that'll just shift back, right? They won't be doing THC, they'll be doing more beer. And I think the shelf space will kind of mirror that, right? And so I do think there is some substitution, like in the absence of some of this THC stuff, people would either enter, whatever legal program their state has, right? If it has recreational, that's easy. We just go to a dispensary. If it has medical, maybe we consider getting a medical card, right? We liked something about this, intoxicating hemp beverage for medical purposes. So maybe we consider getting a medical card and shift into that market. But for like a retailer shelf space that's not a dispensary, I think they send some of it back to craft beer, and I think they chase some of the RTD stuff again.
Yeah.
Maybe some functional beverages too, right? We've seen just
Yeah.
so many functional beverages from, mushroom stuff to just general non-alc, and there's a ton of that. So, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Non-alc intoxicating hemp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
Non-intoxicating
Not,
intoxicating.
yeah, exactly. Total CBD, because I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
But we
Oh,
have some. So now what needs to happen, right? Like because there's the intoxicating hemp guys will make this argument of like people have come to rely on us for medical
mm-hmm,
reasons, right? And
mm-hmm,
we can't leave what are effectively patients
mm-hmm.
without medication.
Veterans and yeah.
Yeah, and that's completely fair. So these states need to more rapidly develop their medical program, and you've already immediately seen it from Texas, right?
Yeah.
Last Monday or a little over a week ago, right? Exactly a
Mhm.
week ago, Texas awarded 9 medical licenses in the state. They divided the state into, I think, 11-ish districts, 10, 11 districts. They're going to ultimately award 12, but they gave out more medical licenses. Back in September, they increased the uses, the approved uses for medical THC to include chronic pain. Before it was all like the most extreme, dire only type of uses. And now it's chronic pain. And they allow telemedicine. And now you have 9 licenses going out. So Texas has, not even including gas stations, has over 8,000 intoxicating hemp retail locations, not even including gas stations or unlicensed folks. They need to quickly build a medical program to satisfy whichever type of consumer was in the intoxicating hemp category for medical purposes, because they don't have an alternative, right? So if you're an intoxicating hemp consumer in Texas today, you're worried, right? Like what you have and what you think you're using for medical purposes is going away and there's no replacement. But Texas is moving fast to replace it. Obviously, other states have medical and adult use programs for THC, but that's what needs to happen for this to go as smoothly as possible from like a consumer standpoint.
Yeah, but then of course it would be onerously taxed, right? Whereas it's not right now.
Well, and that's a really good point. Yes, it would probably be more expensive, but on a federal basis, they're talking about reimbursement of CBD. And
Mm.
so reimbursement of medical purpose CBD, which might get you there, and I think it's paving the way for medical reimbursement maybe on THC and a medical program. But one of the administration's large donors, who I think is paying for some of the renovations going on at the White House.
Is this
uh,
True Leave?
no, it's Mr. Kessler. I
Oh,
believe his
okay.
first name's Howard. But
Mm.
Mr. Kessler is advocating reimbursement on a medical basis for CBD. So to your
Oh,
point, to try to keep those prices down, because that's
okay.
that's how you lose the topic, is you take away a product that people are using for medical or veteran type purposes without something to replace it. And so I think they're aware of that, and I think that's why you saw Texas move so fast, or is moving so fast, and why you're seeing the push on a federal basis for some reimbursement of some stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, well, one more on hemp, and then because you cover Bevalc as well in
Mhm.
retail. So my last question would be, let's say they do come up with a federal framework for intoxicating hemp. Who do you think are the first Bevalc players to jump in?
Uh, um, it's gonna be the best innovator. It's gonna be Boston Beer, right? It's the other guys aren't fast with much, right? When you think of categories that have developed, they're not that quick. And when they tried to be fast, it didn't really work. So what I'm kind of referring to is like Constellation takes that equity stake in Canopy.
Right.
That's been a huge headache for a long time. Molson Coors partnered with Hexo.
So,
Hexo doesn't exist anymore. It's part of Tilray, and that joint venture, was it? I can't remember the name of it. Truss,
yeah.
Yeah.
is completely gone. Tilray partnered, or Anheuser-Busch partnered with Tilray. Like that ended up being a lot of wasted time for them. And is kind of not their focus at all anymore. So they're building the pipes, if you will, or getting prepared for this moment is not that far along. Versus Boston Beer took it much more methodical at first, which was correct. They said, let's try some of this stuff just in Canada, just to learn. And so they launched Teapot, and they now have, is it Emerald? I forget
Yeah.
exactly what it is, but they have Emerald up there too. And Paul Weaver was saying Teapot is available in 1,800 retail locations now in Canada. So they have like a full brand ready to go. They have been working on formulations and they've kind of extended it to new brand families. They're messing around with gummies in addition to beverages. They're most ready. It doesn't necessarily mean they want it to happen, but if it
Yep.
were to happen, they're by far the most ready. Where everybody else, started some of these type of ideas 6 years ago, they're all
Yeah.
defunct at this point.
Right. Just a little before their time, maybe.
A little before their time, a little too excited, but had the Tilray Anheuser-Busch kind of continued maybe, or the Hexo Molson Coors continued, maybe they would be there, but they all kind of cut ties with it a little bit, and it's small for
Yeah.
in the size of their larger businesses, so maybe it wasn't the best use of resources. But Boston Beer showed when they can get innovation right, it's not small for them, right? Even like a Sun Cruiser, right, is would be small for Anheuser-Busch, but it
Hmm.
matters for Boston Beer. In the
Right.
same way, these THC products someday could matter for Boston Beer way before they would be big enough to matter for Anheuser-Busch.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And speaking of Anheuser-Busch, we had breaking news on Friday that the long rumored Beatbox deal finally came to fruition. AB acquiring an 85% stake in Beatbox for just under 500 mil. You don't cover them, but you cover their competitors. Do you think this worries their competitors?
I do a little bit, and I'm sure we're going to get to Molson Coors kind of as we
Hmm.
go.
Yeah.
I do a little bit because the industry as a whole has taken a lot of kind of heat from the investor community for not being fast enough on trends or not being part of some of these trends. So they're pushing Molson Coors to do more. They're pushing Anheuser-Busch to do more. And so the others who missed out on an asset that's growing as rapidly as it is, right? I mean, you have the latest numbers probably better than I do, but almost up triple digits, probably. It's something that's growing like that. It was crossed a certain scale threshold, like a certain size threshold. That is an asset they all would be interested in, or at the very minimum, that their investor base would like them to pursue.
Sure.
And to that end, like I'm actually a little bit surprised by the beatbox purchase price. Like, it's
Yeah.
85%, so it does imply whatever, close to 700 million, I guess, a little under, but I'm a little surprised it wasn't a touch higher.
Yeah, it
And
seems low. Totally.
yeah, and again, that's another reason why, like, if a Molson Coors investor would be like, Were you there? Were you trying to
Yeah.
get a hold of this? Why wasn't this the right price?"
Yeah.
Those type of assets are very rare in alcohol, and the investors are pushing them more and more to do it. Find them in alcohol, or find them in other categories, like go into protein, go into
Mm.
all, bigger into the non-alc stuff. Like go talk to, I mean, who knows, but go talk to Liquid Death, right? Go talk to
Mhm.
these giant companies that have emerged that you haven't been a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And then just one more, and then I'll kick it back to Jay. But you mentioned Molson Coors. What are you hearing? What questions do investors still have about Rahul Goyal?
Yeah, they're getting to know him a little better, right? Because he's doing
Hmm.
conferences and he's starting to do kind of the investor circuit. But he had been a little bit of an unknown, right? He wasn't on the investors' radar as a potential replacement. He hadn't really been in front of the investment community before the announcement, right? Others had, right? Others had done investor meetings and investor conferences, and he hadn't. So he's a little bit unknown. But what is interesting to me is he's not external, obviously, but he comes from the role of chief strategy officer. And that office and that unit is usually like the more creative stuff. Like when you
Hmm.
think about his resume, it's some of the creative partnerships with Coca-Cola or some of the outside of the traditional beer products. And that is a welcomed resume for the investor community. If Molson Coors didn't go external, we at least want somebody who thinks a little bit more outside the box, right? As far as I would guess, his role as chief strategy officer wasn't how do we market Miller Lite and Coors Light, right? And it wasn't how do we merchandise those two or how do we, get price on those two by region. His role was how do we make the best use of the assets we have and how do we find the best opportunities outside our organization? And I
Mhm.
think that's what he's going to look to do. And he's suggested it a little bit on some of these events and conference calls, even where he's striking a far more urgent tone, and we got to move faster, and we got to do more, bigger, quicker. And I think investors like hearing that because, aside from the Bud Light issues, Molson Coors has had a tough time finding growth and participating early on trends.
Yeah, yeah. And just a quick note, breaking news, Rahul will be speaking at the summit in January, so we're super excited about that. So, yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
And
absolutely.
that's awesome too, because I imagine he hadn't been in front of all the distributors as
Right.
much as some of the other candidates were. So I mean, that's an awesome opportunity for him to be in the system, seeing everybody.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about investor community pushing suppliers, and Raul sounds open to,
Mhm.
making deals, but I think maybe it was at Morgan Stanley. He talked about deals that needed to move the needle. Um, what did you take from that, and where would you see them like eyeing a space? Because at first I thought maybe like buying an RTD spirit or something,
Mhm.
but moving the needle doesn't seem to jive with,
Yeah.
you know, a an emerging RTD spirit brand.
It's fair. So to move the needle, they might have to go the other direction first. They might have to sell something first.
Hmm.
So in order to get something big enough to move the needle, you need more money. And to get more money, you might consider selling Europe, right? If you remember way back before COVID, so this would have been like, in fact, it was Halloween. It was Halloween 2019. Carlsberg got asked, "Have you heard Molson Coors is looking to sell their Europe assets?" And Carlsberg said yes. And so they've, at least at times, Molson Coors has considered selling Europe. And that would be, if they did that, that would be the ammunition to go do bigger things. And then what those bigger things are, they are, Jordan, I'm with you. They're hard to identify. But that would be the way to get the capital necessary to find things that could move the needle. You go
Hmm.
sell Europe. I don't know what the value would be. They paid 3.5 billion for it, I think. Central Europe, they paid 3.5 billion. They obviously own the UK on top of that. So you have a number with billions involved. That would be the ammunition to go do something that can move the needle. And then I don't know. And then you go talk to Heineken about their USA business too, if you want to stay in beer. You talk to Diageo about their US beer business, or you get more creative with some of the outside the category stuffs like the big non-alcs or the big functionals. But I think that first step would be to build the war chest to go do it. And I think the
Yeah.
way to build the war chest is to sell Europe.
Yeah. What
Uh,
about Liquid Death, Carbless, and a three pack? I'm missing one. And
Yeah, the who's hard. The who is completely hard because investors aren't super eager to go do more beer, right? They're
yeah,
like,
right.
beer's rough. Why don't do more beer? And then it's like, all right, how much are you willing to pay for something like Beatbox? Or do you go talk to Surfside? Do you go talk to Stateside, right? And I'm sure Rahul should if he hasn't, right? Like, and that's a conversation they need to have because they need outside the box and they need to move the needle, and there's not that many of those. So I think
Mhm.
it's build the war chest and then go find ideas.
yeah.
Sorry, Jay.
No, I think you were going to ask this, Jen, but just on kind of past M&A, they recently had a write down on Blue Run, and I'm curious, what does that tell you? But also, in this world of convergence, does it seem like a beer supplier trying to take on full strength spirits is like a bridge too far? It seems like that has never really, really panned out. Where the other
Yeah.
way, it works
Yeah.
just fine, but beer suppliers going that way just doesn't seem to pan out.
You're right. I mean, historically, it hasn't seemed to work too well. I think that the odds of it working improve the more and more the middle tier converges,
Hmm.
right? So the more the middle tier is doing both, the easier or the better the opportunity would be for a manufacturer to do both. And so it's happening. I think it's getting a little bit easier, but it's still been very hard for them to do. In particular, that asset, just was whiskey at like the worst time. Whiskey
Hmm.
dried up in a few ways. The demand domestically dried up, but then all the kind of tariff and reciprocal tariff and anti-US stance in places really hurt American whiskey and forced like an excess supply issue on the industry, right? Like international demand just wasn't as strong when there'd be a huge tariff forcing the price up and people didn't want to buy American products anyway. So we got stuck with a whole bunch of extra whiskey in the United States and no extra demand to consume it. And so that whiskey just sits forever, right? They just try to ride it out as long as they can, but that ties up a lot of cash just sitting on all of that extra whiskey inventory. So all the whiskey guys have had a hard time, whether it's Brown-Forman as Jack Daniels in the biggest or Molson Coors' efforts in whiskey. They're not unique, I guess, is what I'm saying in that struggles with that asset. But as the distributors carry more and more spirits, the beer distributors carry more and more spirits, it increases the opportunity for them to try stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's easy. It just gets, slightly more palatable.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask about energy because we were talking about needle moving deals and energy feels like it could possibly come into play there, but they've already, put so much effort into ZOA. Um, and so do you think that's something that they want to continue to see through? Or if there was something available, maybe they'd take a chance? And do you think there's confidence that that if they bought something, they could, push that to success because they've kind of had mixed results with what they've had in energy so far.
Yeah, they could do both, right? Like you could keep working on Zoho. Hello?
There
Okay, you're
you
back.
are.
You lost me. I'm plugged in. But no, I just got a little pop-up that said my internet connection is unstable. So can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
now
you're
you're
good
good.
now.
Okay. Um, so I was saying they could try to do both, right? The Molson Coors could try to, figure out ZOA and explore different brands. Like if you think about the energy drink companies, they all own more than one brand at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like Celsius has Alani Nu now, right? So it's a two-branded energy drink company. Monster's bought a few over the years, right? It's Monster, they bought Bang. I don't even know what else they own, but Rain, like it's a
Yeah,
few branded energy drink companies. So they could, it's not one or the other, I guess, but they would have to rely on the distributors to really push that type of product. And the distributors have been good at building it. As long as you can give them some assurances it's not going away, that they're glad to build it. And they've shown they're really, really good at building those energy drink brands. So it could be a category that they pursue, and it doesn't just have to be ZOA or a different brand. It could be both.
yeah,
It's interesting to me, and I'm curious your thoughts on this too, Bill. We keep seeing more and more energy brands coming out. There's one I've been looking at called El Jefe that looks really interesting that some distributors have said they're seeing good trends with. There's one called Lucky, well, it's like Lucky bad word. I don't know which bad word it is, but it looks intriguing. I want to try that one, right? And then, of course, Liquid Death just came out with theirs, and they just keep coming. There's Bloom, there's so many. How many more energy beverages are viable in this space, right? I mean, I guess if you compare it to beer, for example, there's a long runway, but it's not beer. How many energy drinks can the consumer support, right? Viably.
Yeah, it's like it's a great question because they don't have like regional cachet like a big craft brewer
Right.
could, right? Like we're big in the Pacific Northwest, and then we're fine with that, right? And they don't have like that regional attachment even. So how many national energy drink brands could there be? That's really hard. And if you look at most categories, it's not that many, right? Like
Hmm.
you could do beer, you could do soda, you could do I don't know, a whole bunch of different categories. There aren't that many national brands in consumer categories. So that lift is very hard. But to your point, beer is big, but the some of the occasion they're taking is quite big too, right? They're competing in caffeine. So they're competing against coffee.
Hmm.
And coffee is obviously a very big category. And younger generations, maybe almost like in beer, they haven't gone to coffee in the same
Right.
way. They've gone to energy drinks as they've entered the I need caffeine part of their lives.
Sure. Yeah.
And so they're taking from a pretty big pie. But I do agree, like you don't have, I don't think, a path to that many national energy drinks. And so it's hard. Right now, the national energy drinks are really just, I'm sure I'm messing this up a little bit, but it's Monster, Red Bull, and then
Mhm.
Celsius is probably third.
Yeah. And then you have, the girly Alani Nu. So they're targeting the
Yep.
female consumer. And now, of course, Monster has Flirt, which actually looks interesting. Right. So you can find these niches, but how many more are left, right? Like there's only so many. And whereas a beer drinker, yeah, you want the beer drinker or the beer producers want you to be a single beer drinker, but people drink around, right? I don't
Mhm.
feel like people really drink around much in energy. Like you guys, you and Jordan would know better than I would because y'all consume more energy drinks than I do. But I mean, you generally have your energy brand. You don't drink around, right? So
Oh, I get
No,
around.
I'm not like I want to find the hottest new white can energy drink. Right. Yeah. There's no, but you're right. The health attributes have been where it's been incremental, and that's been the case for a while. So Monster introduced the low carb, and then the ultra, and that Celsius kind of came in with a better for you angle, and so like the attributes and the better for you stuff is where the incremental has been in energy drinks. So that probably continues, but the mega brand building is hard there.
yeah. Jay, you drink around more than Bill in energy, I think.
Yeah, I do just because of flavors, because it seems like they can put out whatever flavor you want. And
Hmm.
I'm not, sold on any particular brand. It's more about, oh, that flavor sounds interesting. And they're rotating so fast that, sometimes they have the ones I like, sometimes they don't. So I'll just
Yeah.
look for a new one.
Interesting. That is
I,
interesting.
where I struggle there, Jordan, is like I don't want to miss when I go for my caffeine. I don't want to miss,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't.
Right.
I don't
Yeah,
want to be
because
like,
then
oh,
you've
this is
yeah.
gross. I can barely get it down because then I might not get to where I
Yeah.
need to be.
I know. You know that I hear that too. Well, let's talk about Constellation.
Mhm.
In recent scans, like the last, I don't know, month or so, we've seen it outperform, do better. So, I think that's driven by Pacifico, which, in recent months again has gotten even bigger than Banquet in scans. And then there was that new seasonal Noche Especial, which frankly, I didn't think would be that needle moving at all. It was small, but they really exceeded their expectations. I think
Mhm.
they depleted more than half the production run in just the first 2 weeks, even though, again, it was supposed to be in market very short period. But will the tailwinds continue, or do you think that's just a blip for them?
I think it gets better from here, and part of it's just the year over year is going to look cosmetically better because they're going to start lapping stuff,
Hmm.
right? The whole industry is going to begin lapping that February slowdown, right? It was really February of 2025 where things slowed down. That's for everybody. But if you remember right before that, pretty much when we were at your conference last year, they had the California issues with the wildfires. So
Hmm.
their prior year comps really get easier in January. But I think what's lost a little in this, like things have gotten slightly better conversation. They got better during a period where there was government shutdown and there were delayed, disrupted SNAP benefits. So, like Constellation's trends getting slightly better when there was like a negative consumer confidence shock is rather encouraging, right? Like that's an environment where most of the retailers that I talked to, they got worse. So
Hmm.
most of retail got worse, but Constellation and beer actually seemed to get a little bit better during that period. Like, if Kroger reported recently and Walmart and Target, and they kind of all had the same message was like November was harder than September and October. And it's government shutdown and it's delayed SNAP benefits, things that you would think would hurt the beer consumer, right? Some government jobs weren't there for a little bit, and some payments for,
Hmm.
income for food weren't there. And Constellation Trend got better. Even beer got a little bit better, right? So I think that's a very encouraging way to kind of be exiting the year. These are the hardest prior year comps, like October, November, December last year were actually kind of strong. 2024 were actually kind of strong, small months, but strong months. And those are being lapped better than the most of the months of the summer. And you get the easier stuff in terms of prior years in beginning in January for Constellation and then February for the industry.
To what do you attribute that better trend? I mean, are people just so depressed they're drinking more finally, or like,
It's a good question. I don't know, but I'm of the opinion that a lot of this is cyclical, and a lot of this is the stress on the consumer and the Hispanic consumer in particular. And even if things aren't getting better for the Hispanic consumer, as they adjust to the new environment, even if the environment's worse than it has been and hasn't gotten better, as they adjust to whatever their new normal is, that beer consumptions come back a little bit, right? So it's just once you're get some distance from shocks, negative shocks, whether it's immigration related or economy, broader economy related. Once you get some distance from the shocks, people go back to what they were doing largely. And I think it's taken a while because unfortunately there's been a lot of negative shocks, but I think that's what's happening. I think it's more a factor of time and the cyclicality of a consumer's response to a negative shock.
Yeah, yeah. So Jordan was at NAX a
Hmm.
month or two ago, and he found all these new products from Constellation that are coming out. And
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
think he would agree with me that at least for some of them, if you put them in front of you and said, "Okay, who's this product from?" we would never have said Constellation, right? So, like one is a spiked apple refresher called Peels, but then there is a value import, a Mexican import called Barrito. So, what do you think about their push into new products? This is not usually something we see from Constellation.
No, it's hard. The Apple one, doesn't really fit, right? It's probably a follow on some of the other people that have had success in Apple. So it that one, low likelihood. I know what they're gonna say, right? Like so when they talk about it finally, they're gonna say it's exceeding their expectations. And we did a note a number of years ago, and I'm gonna again mess it up because it's been too long. But we did a note a number of years ago where we took a look at all their innovation. So this would have been pre-COVID, all their innovation. And at the time it was like RTDs on Svedka, whatever raspberry cooler Svedka, things, all their innovation. And across the board, universally, they would say, this one is exceeding our internal expectations. Every single time they would say that. And a lot of those brands don't obviously exist anymore. So I know they're going to say that the Apple one is exceeding their expectations, but I don't know that it means much yet. The better opportunity is probably on that value import. It's more authentic, right? It's more what they obviously are do and do well. It's a known brand there, and a lot of their consumers, are here. And it solves a little bit of that value disconnect, right? The group of consumers that might be most under pressure have some of the most expensive beers that they prefer. They're Corona, Modelo, higher price points than premium lights are, and that consumer faces the most pressure, and you're asking them to buy the most expensive beer. And
Mhm.
so this solves that a little bit. And I'm sure it's going to be slow to start, but it is a different foray into Mexican imports, and it is one that matches what the consumer is asking for. So I think that one has a much better chance of success, even when, and Jen, I know we've talked about this, but like even when Anheuser-Busch tried to buy Montejo, right? They brought that into the US in late 2014, early 2015. So they brought Montejo. That was at the same price point as all the other Mexican imports, right? It was priced in line with the Mexican imports. And so it didn't really solve anything, right? It was kind of the same thing everything else is doing, and who's more authentic, Modelo or Montejo, and Modelo won, right? Obviously, this is bringing in a real brand, and but bringing in a new value proposition that the consumer is asking for.
And I think, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's like super low. It's like 3.3% ABV. So they could maybe they
It's
source from other,
it's under
consumers too.
4. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So it's super low, which is another trend, obviously. Jay, your turn.
Um, we talked about AB, and I know you don't cover AB, but to what do you owe their success with, Mick Ultra and Busch Light and having actual beer brands grow this year? And, is there anything that the beer industry, big B, can learn from that or replicate moving forward?
Yeah, I mean they're two very different things. The Mick Ultra is like the real light beer right now, right? It's positioned itself as the true light beer for active lifestyle consumption, and that fits a I don't know, a consumer desire for I want to be active. Yeah, beer is bad, but Mick Ultra is fine for an active person with an active lifestyle, right? Like it kind of fits the convergence of I care more about my health and I want a light beer, and that they've been branding themselves as the active light beer for a long time, right? Coors Light's the cold from the mountains light beer, and the Miller Lite's the better tasting light beer. But Michelob Ultra for a very long time has been branding itself as the lifestyle light beer. And that's where people are right now, right? They're
Yeah.
like, all right, I want to drink better, eat better, but if I still want to drink, I'm the lifestyle guy. Mick Ultra is my beer, right? So they branded early where the kind of the trend went. Bush Light is, I think, a lot of that like consumer looking for value, right? The consumer being weak, we're trading down into Bush Light. It's obviously a strong brand to begin with, but that incremental growth, I think, is people looking for a lower price point, and Bush Light satisfies it.
Yeah.
Like when
Uh,
I tell our the guys who cover other sectors for us, even our economist guys, I tell them Bush Light is a good thing to monitor for like consumer health. Like when Bush Light really gets ripping, then people are probably a little bit worried, like Apple and innovation aside. But like when Bush Light is doing really well, there's some stress because people don't switch that frequently. So if you see like a spike in Bush Light, something's going on at the consumer level.
yeah. Um, this year it seemed like AB kind of shifted focus to those brands. Like those were the priority brands, and I know that's kind of been building, especially with the Bud Light fallout. But do you see Molson Coors kind of shifting focus around with Banquet on such a tear, and kind of the same old from Miller Lite and Coors Light doing a little bit better, but
Yeah. They really have to lean into the success Banquet's having and try to distinguish Miller Lite and Coors Light from each other a little bit. Because Miller Lite and Coors Light are competing in that premium light shrinking pie, right? And they compete against each other in that shrinking pie. And so like Coors Light success, not one to one, but Coors Light success takes probably a little bit away from Miller Lite, right? Like they are considered for a lot of consumers substitutes. So like when fine, if they get a great campaign on Coors Light or figure out something with Coors Light, it hurts Miller Lite or vice versa. And that's a difficult problem. It wasn't a problem when light beer was just growing, right? When like
yeah,
that pie was growing, it wasn't a problem because there was enough for everybody and all the brands. But when the pie is shrinking, you don't want two products that compete so directly against each other. So they got to figure out a way to separate those two more or distinguish those two more. And Coors Banquet, I don't know how you use it, but Coors Banquet could be the wedge to do it, right? Coors Banquet has a very different branding and association than do those light beers. And so use the success of Coors Banquet to figure out a way to separate Coors Light and Miller Lite a little bit, because I think those two compete against each other too much.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. I never, we've written so much about the success of Banquet, but it never really clicked with me how much run room still it has until Bill, you and I 2 or 3 weeks ago were getting ready to go to like a craft thing. Like
Mhm.
it was like the Grateful Dead for the old craft hippies, right? We're like, oh, we're going to a beer fest again. It's been like 15 years. And Bill was like, I don't have like, what do I wear? He was like, can I wear my Banquet shirt? And I was like, yeah, you can wear Banquet, you can drink Banquet anywhere, right? And that's just kind of
Mhm.
what they have on their hands, right? And I'm one of the questions I'm going to ask Rahul is Rahul. I think somebody called out all the people on the last analyst calls because it sounded like Rahul when it's Rahul. But anyway, is when and if can Banquet get to a top three brand? Because I think it's absolutely possible, but it's tricky because you want to ride the marketing that's gotten them here, which is Yellowstone and that sort of the Western and that sort of thing. But you also have all this opportunity. And maybe you don't change because you do have that opportunity and it came with marketing it this way. But how do you not F it up and keep driving it? So that's
Eh,
not an
eh,
easy thing.
your point's right. It has like really good credibility among any group, right? Like I was wearing the Coors Banquet hat at the cannabis convention, and
Uh-huh.
like people were like, "Oh, that's a sweet hat," not like alcohol's the enemy, right? Like
Right.
that, their first thought is probably alcohol's the enemy, generally speaking, but not with Coors Banquet, right? Like
Right.
Yeah.
Coors Banquet seems to get a pass right now in like any environment. Um,
Totally.
so
Totally.
they're doing a really good job. I don't know how they use it, but I do think it's an opportunity to figure out a way to separate Coors Light from Miller Lite.
Yeah. Interesting. We didn't have this as one of our questions, but you mentioned Svedka, and I'm curious your thoughts. I don't know if you saw the news that Sazerac obviously is advertising in the Super Bowl, and we all thought, oh, for sure they'll be advertising Buzzballs, and no, they're advertising Svedka with the whatever Fembot, Svedka bot, whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't, I don't know that I have too many. I mean, it seems like you'd want it to be showing a little bit more of a recovery before you went in for a
Yeah.
big media spot. But Schweck at one time was a very big vodka brand, and it just kind of got lost in that like flavor explosion that happened in vodka years and years ago. I mean, I remember one time talking to Constellation about it. And we were like, this could be like $1 billion brand. Obviously, that's not what Sazerac bought it for, but that's what it looked like. Vodka was hot, Svedka was doing really, really well. And they were basically like, well, we couldn't even sell it anyway because the tax bill would be too high. All right. So like they at the time, there was like the too big of gains on Svedka. But I think I would like to see, like, if I was like, I want an ad for a brand, I'd want that brand to be further along on its like recovery and reestablishment before I ran a Super Bowl
Yeah.
ad. Super Bowl ads are great for awareness, but they're also like very general market. And Schwecka's not back in that general market framework, right? Like you need to work with the distributors and the retailers really hard to get it back to
Mhm.
where, it's getting some attention before you can go big broad like a Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, I'm guessing that their angle is this is how we bring it back, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
AI is hot, what do you call them? Humanoid robots, whatever,
Sure,
like
sure.
are hot. So maybe we can have this go viral and put Svedka back on the map. It seems like a bit of a Hail Mary, but I can't think of any other
It does seem
reason.
to be, it does seem to be what they're trying to do. And like we can just call it all Skynet, right? Like it's all just Skynet, the whole thing. And we're
Are
we're here to consume the alcohol.
Nice.
are you
Well,
surprised that Molson Coors is bowing out of the Super Bowl this year?
I didn't even know
Oh.
that.
Wow.
So
he's
yes,
too busy to read BBD every morning, apparently.
yeah, I am surprised because the whole idea was like the Super Bowl exclusivity opened up and you would see the competing ads, and I am surprised. I mean, I think they need to do instead of doing like Bud Bowl, open it up, compete everybody, do Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Light, and actually put a competition behind it involving all the industry executives and make it a fundraiser. And so
Oh, that'd
Coors
be
Light, Bud Light, Miller
sweet.
Light against each other in some sort of competition for a
Yeah.
fundraiser as the new version of Bud Bowl.
Yeah, that'd be fun. And that helps with the whole team beer, like
Mhm.
rebranding beer, because the conversation obviously about, Bevout's so bad for you, we need to redirect it to something that's not at all health related. Just, this is not about that. Not everything in life is about being healthy. So, well, my last question would just be, you were around, and I don't remember if you covered it directly, but I know that you were part of the teams that did cover when Coke was refranchising more than a decade
Mhm.
ago, right? And now there's all this talk about Pepsi refranchising. So, what are your thoughts on the likelihood of that, and what are the lessons from Coke?
Okay. So it's history time.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola and Pepsi bought their bottlers back around the same time. Call it 2010. It might be slightly different, but right around 2010, Coca-Cola and PepsiCo bought their bottlers back. And if you go back to that time, those bottlers or independent bottlers were very powerful because their contracts were, very old and very kind of hastily written at the time, right? Coca-Cola and PepsiCo just wanted to get everywhere, and so they wrote these very favorable for the distribution tier contracts to get their product into various markets. And Coca-Cola and PepsiCo were both kind of frustrated with that their bottler relationships that didn't require the bottlers to do too much. And so Coca-Cola said, we want new pack sizes and canning lines and this kind of innovation. And the bottlers were like, we don't really care to do
Nah.
that. We don't
Yeah.
really care to do that. So Coke was kind of like, we're going to buy our bottlers back. We want our product assortment offering, our price pack architecture to look like Mexico, right? We want every single price point, every single pack size available, and our independent bottlers wouldn't do it with us. So we're going to take it back and we're going to help we're going to help set up that in the US. And so that's what they did. And that's why you see all those tiny little cans and all those different 8 packs, 6 packs, 20-ounce bottles, 16-ounce bottles, 24-ounce cans, whatever. You know, you get the point. And so they built that. And then I'm sure they changed some other stuff too, and they refranchised it out in a much more concentrated way, right? So you saw some previous big independent bottlers get more territories. You saw, some people that formerly were spread across 5 different ownership groups go down to one ownership group when it refranchised out. So it's much more concentrated, and they are much more efficient than they used to be.
Mhm.
And PepsiCo did not refranchise back out. They did a very similar thing. They bought 2 publicly traded companies at the time. They had 2 publicly traded bottlers at the time, and they bought both of those back. And they've been very slow to refranchise them out. But it does sound or seem like they're going down that path. And it makes sense. I mean, for PepsiCo, they're a manufacturer, they're a branding organization. Distribution shouldn't be a core competency of theirs.
Mhm.
Let other people who are really, really good at this do it, and you do what you're good at, and that's branding and marketing. And so it makes sense to me that they would be different tiers. I don't know why it's taken them so long, but Coca-Cola did it. They made their organization much better, and they made a lot of money when they did it. So it was a giant win for Coca-Cola, the whole process.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Any other parting thoughts or shots or
No, the cannabis guys are asking for rescheduling. They
Mhm.
want medical markets. They got rid of, a big competitor in intoxicating hemp, not of their own doing. Like the cannabis companies aren't powerful themselves either, right? So it
Mhm.
wasn't they did it, but a big competitor is going away. They're asking for rescheduling. The beer wholesalers at the end of the day will be fine, even though, they're selling some intoxicating hemp stuff. But the beer wholesalers now will put more pressure back up the tier, just like investors are on the manufacturers now to help fill that hole in their warehouses. Go find us something exciting then, because we're losing something that's a little bit important.
No, that makes sense. So 2026 should be interesting.
They all are. They
Yeah.
all are.
It will be interestinger. And we'll have you on in 6 more months. And hopefully you'll be at the summit if we can get Nana to come down and take care of the kids.
Yeah, well,
Come on, Nana.
we call Nana. We need February for beer to get better. If February the data doesn't get better for beer, the year-over-year numbers don't get better for beer in February, the structural people will have a really good point.
Yeah. All right. Well, until then, these lovely people will see you later. I'll see you in a couple hours.
Thank you
Thanks,
guys.
Bill.
Yeah, bye guys.
Cheers.